You probably came across this story last week as it was published by almost every mainstream media outlet in the country, as the Globe and Mail wrote. Thousands of foreigners' criminal convictions forgiven by Ottawa over 11-year span, raising transparency concerns. Or as CTV News wrote, Canada has approved entry for more than 17,600 people with a criminal record in last decade. Now, with a story like that, and particularly with a headline as explosive as that, I wanted to make this quick video to get behind the headline, to talk a little bit more about this story, what it's not telling us and what it might be telling us, and to address some of the concerns we're hearing on both sides of this issue. There are some arguments being raised by people who are trying to defend the government over this story, which need to be addressed. And likewise, with headlines like that, it's easy to blow this story up and to make it something that it isn't. So stay tuned as we get behind the headlines on this story and talk more about Canada's immigration crisis. Alright, so for this story I want to read through the Globe and Mail piece because that likely received the highest number of readers. As the Globe reports, government figures show that in the 11 years up to and including 2024, 17,600 people convicted of criminal offenses abroad were considered rehabilitated by IRCC. This meant they were able to apply to enter Canada, including through work and study visas, as permanent residents or visitors. IRCC has not, however, released a breakdown of the kind of criminal offenses that were forgiven. You would likely think that the majority of applicants to have their crimes, their criminal records, rehabilitated or forgiven in this case by the IRCC would be denied, right? The majority of cases would be denied, the minority of cases would be approved, and those people would then be allowed to apply to enter Canada. But actually, it's the opposite way around. In 2024, 1,390 people had their criminal convictions forgiven by the IRCC, while only 105 applicants were refused. The year prior, the numbers are the same. 1,505 people were considered to have been rehabilitated, while 70 applicants were rejected. Now, keep in mind, between 2013 and 2024, our country has seen a record population boom, particularly during the Trudeau years and more specifically the last 5 years. In 2023 and 2024, Canada had over 1 million international students in the country. Add to that hundreds of thousands of further temporary foreign workers and other people on temporary visas. And of course, last year, the country was welcoming in close to 500,000 new permanent residents. We're talking about millions of people in Canada who are here on temporary visas. According to the government figures, it represented 6.5% of the Canadian population. Now, the thing is, everyone watching this video already knew about those figures. They already knew that we had millions of people in the country on temporary basis. We had a population that was stretched to the limit. Our infrastructure can't keep up. Our healthcare system is collapsing under the weight of this population pressure. Basically, everything in the country is feeling the strain of a massive population surge. So it makes one question why it is that Canada needed to have these people in the country in the first place. It's not exactly as if Canada was desperate to have 17,000 people in the country, an extra 17,000 out of millions. And since Canada wasn't exactly ever in a place where we desperately needed the extra few thousand people, why wouldn't the number of rejections be far higher than it is? In total, between 2014 and 2024, there was a total of 25,350 applications from foreigners to have their criminal records forgiven by Immigrations, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. Of those in total, nearly 70% of applications were accepted. 20% were refused and roughly 10% were withdrawn. Now, what all of this tells me, and what I think many Canadians are feeling about the immigration system, is that the federal government for many years lost sight and track of the main objective of the Canadian immigration system. The immigration system is not for immigrants. Immigration into a country must be done in the best interests of the people of the country and of the country as a whole, the economy. It shouldn't be about being nice and feeling special, about being welcoming. Immigration should be done in the best interests of the people who live in this country, the people who pay taxes in Canada, and the long-term interests of Canada. Now, some of the arguments I'm hearing about this story don't really add up with the facts, and I want to address that. The first argument that I'm hearing in defense of the Canadian government on this story is that a lot of these applications are for minor offenses. The applications to have their criminal records withdrawn perhaps are from people who are protesting an authoritarian government, maybe in China. Or maybe they are people who were locked up for their sexual preferences in third world countries. You can see where I'm going with this. But that is not the case here, because you only have to go through a rehabilitation process. You only have to file an application process if what you are charged with and convicted of in your country of origin is also a crime in Canada. These are not people who are convicted for being gay in some African country or Middle Eastern country. These are not Hong Kong free speech activists. Because as the Globe and Mail story writes, foreigners are, in general, inadmissible to Canada if they have been convicted of an act that is considered a criminal offense in this country. But again, on the flip side, it's important to take a step back and not panic. You see, in some cases, this could be for a high-performance athlete or a famous artist performing a show in this country, who's here for a very brief period of time, who had a DUI in the past, and wants to perform in Canada. Furthermore, 17,600 foreign criminals did not enter Canada. Let's make sure that's noted and understood. Their applications for rehabilitation were approved. They didn't all come into the country. Many of them likely did, but they didn't all come into the country. It doesn't mean that 17,600 of them are here now or have been here in the past. I would imagine that many of these applicants are people who, had a DUI 15 years ago. Maybe when they were kids, they got caught shoplifting once. Not excusing any of it. I'm just trying to, make a point that these are not all murderers, gangsters, and drug dealers. But you really can't blame Canadians for thinking that maybe there's a connection between letting foreign criminals into the country and the rise of crime that we're seeing in our communities, particularly around Southern Ontario. There was a story in the National Post published at the beginning of this year about this phenomenon, about crime tourists. As the National Post wrote back in February, crime tourists, organized burglary gangs are wintering in Canada and ransacking homes. Organized burglary gangs blending sophistication with brute force are wintering in Canada from Latin America and Eastern Europe as crime tourists, coming to take advantage of early seasonal darkness and Canadian habits to ransack and loot homes. It feels as though every time you see a report about a drug or gun smuggling ring or a auto theft gang getting busted, with the names of the people charged and arrested, you're seeing foreign names. And so Canadians are naturally going to make the conclusion, regardless of the immigration status of those that have been recently arrested for involvement in gang and auto theft rings, right? Regardless of their immigration status, when Canadians read stories about 17,000 foreign criminals being welcomed into the country and having their past criminal convictions, cast aside so they can enter the country as either permanent residents, short-term visas, international students, and whatever, they're going to make the conclusion that the federal government is welcoming in these people and they're turning around and causing crimes. It's hard to blame the average Canadian for making that conclusion when you have stories come out like this. I think it's quite obvious that the rational position to take on this would be that the majority of these applications to have past criminal convictions withdrawn by the Canadian government should be rejected. We're not in a position in this country where we are desperate for people to come. We are full. We are full in this country. We all know that we're full. There's nothing wrong with saying that either. The federal government themselves have acknowledged as much. Immigration should be done in the best interests of the population, the people of Canada, the Canadian people. And as soon as it's no longer being done in the best interest of the Canadian people, and maybe it's being done to the interests of large corporate entities, or maybe it's done for the interests of the political party in charge at the moment. When it's not being done in the best interest of the Canadian people, it has to be reassessed. Stories like this only further degrade the Canadian people's trust in their government to oversee a normal and functioning immigration system. Guys, if you like that video and you want to see more, subscribe to my channel, like this video, and share it with your network. Subscribing is the best way to help my small channel grow and reach more Canadians. I'll have more content for you coming up soon. Bye for now, and thank you for watching.